Hi team, welcome back to the C&D kitchen. Now myself, Gemma and the whole Cupcake Jemma team have been so impressed with your lockdown baking so far that today we are stepping things up a little bit and we're going to make some Lamingtons, which are a delicious Australian treat. Thank you Australia for introducing us to these because they are delicious. They are little cubes of vanilla sponge dunked in a chocolate icing so it all soaks into the sponge, and then we coat them in desiccated coconut, and it's absolutely delicious. You are going to love it and it's really fun to make. So I've already got my tin lines. I've got a 9 by 9 inch cake tin here. So as usual, I've lined it with some butter and greaseproof paper, but if you don't have greaseproof, you can just dust it with some flour. And I've also preheated my oven to 170 degrees C so that it's nice and warm when we're ready to put our cake in. So now we're going to start by making our cake, and I've got 200 grams of caster sugar, and that's going to go into a nice large bowl. And then we're going to add 4 whole eggs. So I'm going to crack those into a separate bowl first, just to make sure we don't get any shell into our sugar. So 4 eggs, don't worry about what size you can find, big, small, medium, anything is going to do perfectly for this. And then we're going to tip them into our sugar. And then finally to this, we're going to add some vanilla. So 1 teaspoon of a good quality vanilla. And yes, we always go on about using good quality vanilla, and you're always asking us where we get it or where you can get it. So now you can get it from CupcakeJemma.com. We have these lovely 50 ml bottles. You can get loads out of this. So head over to CupcakeJemma.com after this video and you can get yourself one. So a full teaspoon going into our eggs and sugar. So now we're going to whisk this up with a hand whisk here, or you can do it in a stand mixer, or you can just do it with a normal whisk and brute strength. And we're going to whip it up so it's really nice and fluffy, and you're going to see what that looks like. So this will happen pretty quickly. After about 30 seconds, it's already happening. It's starting to whip up. You'll see nice big bubbles forming, and you just want to keep going until it's really, really pale, and it'll be kind of thick when you drag the whisk through it. So that is looking awesome. I just love eggs. They just do the most wonderful things. So now we're going to add our flour. I've got 200 grams of plain flour, and I'm going to sift it in. Sifting straight in is just going to add lots of air. It's going to make sure it's nice and light. So I'm putting all of that into my sieve, and we're just going to sieve about half of it at a time. And we're going to fold that in using a wooden spoon. This is why I like to do it in a bowl with a hand whisk rather than a stand mixer, because you need to be really gentle with this, because you don't want to knock out any air. So once your first half of flour is completely folded in, we can add the rest, but we're also going to add 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and that's just going to make sure our cake is super, super light. So when you're folding your flour in, you just need to be patient. I know it feels like it's taking a long time, but if you start beating this away, you're going to get rid of all that lovely air that we created with our whipped eggs. So just take your time, slowly, slowly. When your flour is completely incorporated, we're going to add our final ingredient, which is 100 grams of melted butter. You're going to pour that into your batter, and we're going to fold it in the same way that we did the flour. This looks absolutely delicious. It's smooth and it's silky, and this is slightly different to the cake batters that we make normally here, where we do the traditional method of whipping up your butter and sugar. And this recipe is going to make for a really light sponge, but it's also going to be slightly less crumbly, which is perfect for cutting it into little cubes like we're going to do later. So just give it a little shimmy. It kind of, spreads out itself. It's quite liquidy, but we want to make sure it's nice and even. And then we're going to pop it in the oven, 170, already preheated, and it's going to go in for about 25 minutes until a skewer comes out nice and clean. If it's a little bit goo on it, just leave it in for a minute or 2 longer. So So the cake came out of the oven and I let it cool down completely. If you can, then let it cool down overnight, because that's going to give the sponge a chance to kind of relax and soften. It's going to be a lot easier to work with. If you want to do it in the same day, just pop it in the fridge for a couple of hours and it'll be perfect. So now we need to cut it into cubes. So I'm going to start by just cutting the edges off my cake, because my tin was slightly tapered, is that the word? Not sure, slanty. So I just want to make it really nice and square first. And just look how good this sponge is. It's so even, it's baked nice and flat on top, which is going to be perfect to getting nice even squares. So now it's time to cut those squares, and I'm going to use a ruler because I want them to look nice and even. So I'm going to start by measuring it. So it's about 8 inches. So I'm going to go for 2-inch squares. So now we can make our icing, and we're going to start with 50 grams of melted butter, and we're going to whisk in 160 mils of whole milk. And now we're going to add in 45 grams of cocoa powder. And once that's mixed in, 290 grams of icing sugar, already sifted. And finally, a good pinch of salt, just to bring out those flavors as usual. And then it's all ready to go. So I'm just going to pour it into a slightly smaller bowl, so it's going to be easier for us to work with. And we're almost ready to go. We just need our coconut. So I've got about 250 grams of coconut here, but I'm only going to use a little bit at a time because it might get kind of chocolatey and messy. So I'm just going to put a small amount into this bowl, and now we're ready to dunk. So grab your first cube and we're going to put it in the chocolate. It's going to get a bit messy, but that's okay. So I've got some forks here. We're going to gently move it around in the chocolate, and once it's all coated, pick it up, dunk it into your coconut, and we're going to do the same thing, but I'm going to use my hands to kind of sprinkle it around. And once you've coated a couple of sides, you can start moving it around with your fingers. Just make sure it's completely covered, and that is your first Lamington finished. And now we just keep going until we've made all our Lamingtons. It's so cute and it's so squishy, and now this will set, it's not going to set hard, but they will be a little bit less kind of gooey. So put them in the fridge for 5-10 minutes, but I can't wait to do that, so I might get a bit messy, so sorry, but here goes. And it's so good, this bit on the edge here where all the chocolate's soaked into the sponge. It's delicious. Normally I'd tell you to share these around with your neighbours and family, but I don't think you should share them at all. I just think you should eat all of them because they are absolutely delicious, and they keep for a few days too. Store them in Tupperware or wrap them in cling film and they'll be great for 3 or 4 days. So please make these, put your photos on Instagram, use hashtag CupcakeJemma so we can all see them, and head over to CupcakeJemma.com if you want to get yourself a little baking kit, one of the cookies or the cupcake kits, or some lovely merch to help you with your home baking during this isolation period. And we'll be back soon with some more recipes. And we're trying to get as much up for you guys as possible, so make sure you're checking in, subscribe to the channel, press the little bell next to it so that you get notifications every time we upload, and we'll see you soon with more recipes. So enjoy baking these. Ooh, they're super fun.